here's the deal. I'm going to ask you a softball question to start off. And then the only way I know and we know how to have a conversation about this topic is actually to be brutally honest. So, after the softball question, gloves come off, and let's real talk, right? Let's have a real conversation. So here's the starting softball question. Just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us a little bit about this topic and why you are passionate about it. What brings you to the work?
Thank you. So I'm Jen Faigel. I am the Executive Director at CropCircle Kitchen. We are Boston's only nonprofit shared-use commercial kitchen and food business incubator. We've been around since about 2009, and I'm a co-founder of that organization. And we just opened a second facility for what we're doing over in Dorchester in the Grove Hall neighborhood, which is one of the lowest income neighborhoods here in the city of Boston, a very dense residential neighborhood. We took over an old hot dog factory that we turned into a food business incubator. We opened in June, $15 million. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Councilor, among many others. 2070 funding sources. When we are fully up and running with everything we're doing, we will be supporting about 50 businesses a year, every kind of business, food trucks, wholesalers, retailers, and creating somewhere around 150 new jobs in that neighborhood. So we're really excited about that. My work, the reason that I do this work is I spent most of my career doing affordable housing development. I worked in the nonprofit sector, built a lot of great housing, and saw that at the end of the day, people were still poor. And we hadn't really changed what was happening in those communities. And so I got really interested in how could we use the same tools that we use for affordable housing development in the real estate side to think about economic development. So all the work that I do now for the last 4 or 5 years has been only looking at commercial development and trying to think about how can we use more of those same resources to invest in infrastructure that supports business. And really the key thing to me as we have this conversation is about trying to find a way to invest in the infrastructure, because that has been the key around capital for small businesses to get started, that these businesses, the business owners we're talking about, if we're going to change things happening in these low-income neighborhoods, and earlier in this conversation we heard a lot about how wonderful things are happening in Boston, but there's two Bostons, right? There's downtown Boston, and then there's Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, parts of Hyde Park. It's different, and it hasn't reached there, and so what are we going to do to make it reach there? Part of that is how do we build assets? How do we build real opportunity for people to grow and to have generational wealth, generational change to create generational wealth, to create change, sorry. And so to me, what's interesting in thinking about this conversation is, and thinking about what we've done with CropCircle Kitchen, is put a lot of money into resources that create capital, that provide the capital to give somebody an opportunity to now create a business where they don't need all that money to create the business. They show up, there's $1 million worth of kitchen equipment for them to have access to for $35 an hour. That's the way we're going to help them start a business. And so we've been looking, Travis knows this, I've been looking at how do you now take that same model and think about it from a technology side of things. So instead of kitchen equipment, what if it's woodworking, metal, 3D printers, laser cutters, because everybody in these communities needs access to these resources. This is a different economy, and we need to find ways to, if you're a carpenter, if you're a woodworker, if you're an auto mechanic, if you're an artist, if you're a whatever it is, you need to understand how to think about where you connect into this 21st century economy. So that's where I come from.
Thank you. My name is Tito Jackson. As Jen noted, it's only $15 million to get on this panel. You too could be on this panel.
I'll expect my check.
Okay, well you don't want to write some. That's exactly. You can pay my share. My name is Tito Jackson. I'm the District 7 Boston City Councilor. I actually represent the area. I'm lucky enough to represent the area that the CropCircle Kitchen is in. And I'm going to have to get a little food truck going. I cook some things on a regular basis. So we can get it going. Okay, no one steal my idea. But my passion is based on a single statistic that I came across about a year ago in the city of Boston. In the richest part of the Back Bay versus the poorest part of Roxbury, for males, there's a 33-year difference in life expectancy. 33 years difference. And that's mostly attributable to poverty. And so when we think of the social conditions that create violence in the city of Boston, a city where 254 shootings occurred last year, 50 people died, and there was no one fund. I'm just going to keep it real.
Right.
There was no $80 million that went to support the families, and understand there's 204 families who have a family member who did die, and they're hurt and they're maimed, and they are dealing with the issue of trauma. So this, and folks in Travis's space, they call it social determinants of health. These are things that drive me on a regular basis. And the other thing that drives me is that in the city of Boston, black businesses have been moving backwards in terms of the number and scale since the 1980s in the city of Boston.
Hold that thought.
Okay, I won't go there. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. The voice of God just came down. Okay, cool. Okay.
That's why I had to introduce you to my radio.
Yes. And so it's really critical. I did an event that Travis sponsored, and it was an event on access to capital. So the first event that we had, and it was actually, I was supposed to be a year event too. So I was a year event too on the same day. And we had 125 people in Roxbury at Hibernian Hall. And I want to thank Boston Foundation for stepping forward and sponsoring the event. But that shows there's a lot of people who are trying to change their stake in life, and that affordable housing simply doesn't cut it. In the Dudley Square area, about 75% of the housing is subsidized or affordable. The problem that we have there is that there's no mobility for people in those situations. And in fact, our policy, and this is another thing that drives me, is our policy actually dictates that they don't make money. Because it's either you keep your housing, or you go over whatever artificial line that we've drawn as policymakers. And I guess the other guiding path has been people like Vicky Davis, as well as this guy from Cambridge named Tim Rowe, who opened my eyes to, when I was working for Governor Patrick, what real economic development is. And it's not building huge campuses out in Littleton like IBM is doing, but it's actually really germinating small businesses of folks who have dreams, aspirations, and just a lot of sweat equity and hard work. And when I saw what was happening at the Cambridge Innovation Center, my eyes opened. I said, why can't we do that in Roxbury? Why can't we do that in Dorchester? Why can't we do that in Fields Corner, like the Fields Corner Innovation Lab is doing? So I think the people in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, are some of the most creative people. They are the most resilient people in this city. I have census tracts right around where you are, where folks are living on $23,000 or $24,000 a year for families of four. That's called resilience. And so all of that said, those are the things that move me on a regular basis. And before the voice of God chimes in, I'll pass the mic.
This is the only time I get to interrupt Tito. I'm going to take full advantage of it.
Hi, my name is Vicky Davis. I'm the founder and executive director of Youth Cities, and actually on my business card there's also a title of Mother Hen, which my students named that I at first thought was a reference to my older age, but later on realized that it was a term of endearment, so I embraced it. So Youth Cities actually Cities is an acronym standing for creating impact through innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. And in a typical kind of mother-like fashion, I actually got the inspiration for Youth Cities when I first became a mom 6 years ago, actually almost 7 years ago. So I have two little kids, 6.5 and 4, and so they are the inspiration for almost everything I do. When I started Youth Cities, I was actually still running a software company in the video game industry that I had started 15 years ago. And the reason that I created Youth Cities was because I wanted to, I kind of was, when I became a new mom, was trying to figure out how I wanted to raise them, what I would like to instill upon them, things and experiences that I wish I had when I was a kid. And so a couple of things really stuck out for me. The first one was being able to pursue your passion regardless of what that passion or interest is. The reason being is I was raised in an immigrant family that was very fiscally conservative, and without getting into too much detail, I ended up studying accounting because it was quote-unquote recession-proof, job safety, and it didn't matter whether or not I loved it, which I actually didn't realize whether or not I wanted it as a career until after I got into it post-college. But work was called work because otherwise it would be called a hobby. And then work was about making money for more practical things like putting a roof over your head, putting food on the table, and then if there's any left over, save it up for nest egg. And so I wanted to be able to raise my kids and say, you know, whatever you're interested in, you can pursue that. But as a mom, I also want them to be able to have a roof over their heads and food on the table, things of that sort. So being entrepreneurial and being able to spot and identify opportunities is a lifelong skill that you can apply to no matter what your interests are, and so on and so forth. And then the other aspect is about diversity. I grew up in a very kind of homogeneous environment and didn't have a lot of diversity in my life. You know, my mom was definitely my role model, but I didn't really have any others that I could look up to. Now, I'm too stubborn to, you know, let a lack of role model stop me from anything. If I didn't, you know, if something wasn't done before, you know, my stubbornness kind of said, well, you know, why can't I do it? And if somebody questioned whether or not I can do it, you know, it's still, why can't I do it? However, that was, you know, something that I felt that I could potentially have, you know, some impact on with my kids, and wanted to have them be able to experience diversity, not just diversity from an aspect of ethnic or gender, but also among interests and different types of behavior and different types of communication. And you know, even no matter what you end up doing, diversity in a team makes for a better team. Otherwise, you're very lopsided, and you know, people look at your team and say, well, you know, it looks like you need a VA or something because you're not quite balanced. But in that diversity and the appreciation of all that, partly coming from my experience in the video game industry, if you know nothing about video games, you can probably assume that there's the artistic side and the computer programming side, and their background and their influence and their training is very siloed. So by the time they have to work together, there's a lot of workplace friction and a lot of learning curve that at a later age can be a little bit consequential. But that takes place in a lot of different areas as well. So from the introverted to the extroverted, things of that sort. I always felt like a black sheep, no matter what it was, even before my professional life, even before being, you know, a woman in telecom or video games or in entrepreneurship. I always felt like that, you know, I was a little odd, and I am, but you know, it took a while to kind of come in to appreciate that.
We don't think you're odd.
So, well, thank you. So, you know, keeping those things in mind, you know, Youth Cities not only teaches and you know, provides education and tools and a network for entrepreneurial problem solving and entrepreneurial skill set, but everything that we do, whether it's in or out of school programs, we try to do it in a way that addresses a lot of these issues that were very important to me in how we execute a lot of it. So.
I am Gilad Rosenzweig. I'm founder and executive director of Smarter in the City, which is a high-tech accelerator in W Square in Roxbury. I came to Boston, I guess about 3 years ago, 3 years and 1 month. And that was, when I arrived here, that was my first time coming to Boston. I'm from Toronto originally, and lived in Israel for the previous 12 years before coming here. I was an architect. I still am an architect, but I don't do any architecting anymore. And I decided at one point while I was an architect that I actually wanted to be an urban planner. I don't want to be designing just something small for a few people. I want to be designing cities for lots of people. And that got me into urban planning. And that got me to MIT. and I came with my family. And one of the first things we did when we were here that summer was go to the zoo. So we went down to Franklin Park, and after the zoo, I like to explore cities. When you're an urban planner and an architect, you explore cities. And instead of driving back the way that Google might have wanted us to, I said, well, I'm going to go up here, because that looks like a Blue Hill Ave. That looks like an interesting street. And drove up, and I saw Grove Hall. And I thought it was wonderful. I thought this is really a beautiful neighborhood. And we started driving up and down the streets, and beautiful Queen Anne homes, and then I saw a little further down Blue Hill Ave, well, there's a lot of closed doors here, and there's something, what's going on here? And I figured it out very quickly, and then I started to do a little bit more research just for my own knowledge about Grove Hall, and about Roxbury and Dorchester, and it eventually led to my thesis in planning at MIT. And I came in actually looking for transportation, and then I shifted away from transportation. I went to community development, economic development, and the history of urban America, how cities changed, especially in the 40s and 50s, 60s. And that's what got me into Roxbury, and really to love Roxbury and Dorchester. And at the end of my time at MIT, I started working on a project in Dudley Square. And this actually reminds me of what Jen was saying, that the point of the research for this project was to develop a fund, and it's something that's now coming online, to develop a fund to get more investment, triple bottom line investment into development in and around Dudley Square. And what we're trying to prove is that by putting a new project, this includes places like Tropical Foods, Bartlett Yard Place, and in Mission Hill, what is this going to do for the neighborhood or community? And two different things in the way you approach those two terms. And we're looking at how is it going to improve the health? And my role there was actually to say, okay, let's look at this project, let's see how many homes are going to come online, businesses, how it's going to fill in the gap where there's currently a parking lot or an empty bus yard, and what it's going to do to the walkability of the neighborhood, and that walkability would then make a difference to the health. And while we definitely showed that it would improve walkability. And if you just say, well, if you're going to walk down a street that has a beautiful building rather than an empty parking lot, well, it makes a difference. What we couldn't really prove, or what I found a problem with, was that yes, you can improve the look of a neighborhood, you can bring more development, jobs of some type, but it's not going to make the big change that is necessary, especially in a place like Dudley Square, which is raising the median income. And by raising the median income, you're going to make the biggest difference. And you can't just keep on you can't have a neighborhood be perpetually, or any part of a neighborhood be perpetually poor or impoverished and expect things just to continue the way they, well, you can't expect them to continue the way they are or get worse. And so that was one piece. And then I was at MIT, and I was witnessing what's happening in Kendall and down here, and I was sort of indoctrinated with smart cities, and it's important to say, how technology is going to improve cities, and I totally support that. And I thought, well, okay, we got two worlds happening right here in Boston, greater Boston area, where you have places like down here and in Kendall, where you have a lot of opportunity, and you have a lot of networks, and well, good paying jobs. And then you have a place like Dudley Square or Grove Hall where you don't. And I thought, well, there's only 3 miles apart, and a world apart, because you have people who just don't go between the two. And what can we do? And I said, well, it's not just smart cities. How do we smarter in the city? Really like that. And then that was the birth of the name. And I thought, well, let's just make almost like an experiment at the time. It was termed an experiment. Now it's no longer an experiment. We're actually doing it. And so what if we do a high-tech accelerator in Dudley Square, and members of the community, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, will be the startup companies. Let's find them, and we found them, there's many, and let's change the dynamics of where we do innovation and who does innovation, and maybe that can make a difference in the neighborhood.
Fantastic. So if this were a test, all four of you would have failed. And here's the reason why. First of all, and I kind of expected this to happen, you went over your 2 minutes. And in the process of going over in 2 minutes and telling about what brings you to this panel, you were also, all four of you, incredibly demure. Because I don't think the audience really fully grasps the impact of your work and how you have transformed how we as a city are starting to think about bringing innovation into the community and into our neighborhoods. So I just want to appreciate all four of you for that to start off with.
By giving us an F.
By giving you backing you for your appreciation. So yeah, I won't go into the second reason why you failed, but I do want to suggest in philanthropy at the Boston Foundation and other foundations across the country, sometimes when we have these conversations about neighborhoods and community, we throw around this term neighborhood, community, community, and neighborhood. And you got to shelve that term sometimes, and you have to call it what it is, right? Because sometimes we're not talking just about neighborhood and community. We need to be honest with ourselves, and we actually have to start to pinpoint and start talking about race and culture, right? We have to talk about race, culture, and gender. And particularly if we're going to openly have this conversation about innovation in the city and bringing innovation to all Boston neighborhoods, let's strip away this conversation about neighborhoods per se, and let me ask you the question, because I think you all tap danced around it, but I want you to go for the jugular. How important is it to you, and how important is it to your work when thinking about bringing innovation to all Boston's neighborhoods? How do you think about, are you intentional in your mission and in how you view success about race, culture, and gender?
I am very intentional about that. So just so we understand, if we don't deal with the issue that Black males are facing and Latino males are facing in the city of Boston, we will our economy will go away. So looking at males under age 19, 60% of them in the city of Boston are Black and Latino. So if we graduate them at the rate that we're graduating them, if we send them to jail at the rate that we're sending them to jail, understand, most of them are going to jail for entrepreneurship. Keep it real. If we're going to keep it real, they're going to jail for entrepreneurship, but in the world of entrepreneurs, they will be taking too high risk. Right? So the question is, and we're actually going down to see a program, it's called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program out of Texas. And so there is a star person that's coming out of that program. These are C-level folks who go behind the bars and they actually teach people how to be entrepreneurs. And invariably, when they come back out, they're like, well, they may not know what the cost of goods sold, but they knew what the cost of goods sold was. And so there's a guy who came out of there, he now has a $7.5 million a year cleaning business. And so we have to deal with what you're saying. We also have to deal with the fact that the city doesn't look like this audience, just to keep it real. 53% of the people in the city of Boston are people of color. In our school system, 80% of the students are Black and Latino. If you add the Asian students, that's another 9%. And so when it comes down to what we have to think about and be about is definitely closing the digital divide, but also entrepreneurship that is relevant in context. And so I did want to touch on what we talked about before. Black business in the city of Boston was booming in the 80s. We had 6 to 7 companies in this list called the Black Enterprise 100. Some of them were finance companies, some of them, like Archie Williams, was actually a technology company in the 80s in the city of Boston. All of them. So we have 0 companies on the Black Enterprise 100 currently in the city of Boston. The other thing, and I'll pass it after this, is that we need people of color to run stuff. And we also need people to fund stuff for us. So what I found, and I'm an education chair, we were doing some work looking at, there's all charter schools now in New Orleans. And the Black charter schools are doing as well. Because people are not willing to invest in that leadership. So the other challenge that I would put out there is that for funders, for people to fund organizations, individuals, and groups that are for as well as run by folks. And lastly, to give some scaffolding. So we may not be talking about folks who know how to write a business plan. We may not be talking about folks who know where to get non-predatory money. But we have people who are willing to work their butt off for that thing that we call the American dream. And I would say Corey reform, and that's another piece. We have a huge percentage of our population who have a criminal background. And when it comes down to it, there's folks who are literally doing several years for marijuana. And I have people who are coming to my office who are entrepreneurs who want to open dispensaries who are going to do $5 million in the first year for doing the same thing. The same exact thing. Not as well, more a little bit more efficient. But when it comes down to it, we need to make sure that we're giving people the scaffolding to build up these opportunities. And that CropCircle Kitchen is a great example. What Gilad is doing is a great example. Opening the doors of opportunity right where they're at to give them the opportunity to do better for themselves. And you know what most of the time happens? They actually do better for themselves.
Please.
So I absolutely agree with everything that Councilor Jackson Tito has said. I do want to put out a slightly different angle or approach because I feel like there are multiple approaches to that. And for me, especially growing up in a very homogeneous environment, I grew up in New Hampshire. I think I was the token ethnic person for not just Chinese, but all Asian and even beyond that. And so I think that as important as it is to create a strong community around that identity, that shouldn't be the only approach, because I am a big fan of cross-pollinating, so to speak. And so in Youth Cities programs, we try to draw from all different backgrounds, different zip codes, different ethnicities, and things of that sort, so that hopefully, and we try to get as many mentors to represent that diversity as well. But that, first of all, with the cross-pollination, even if you don't exactly see someone who looks like you and thinks like you, at least you're exposed to a lot of differences, and you realize, oh, okay, I don't have to be from a specific type of background, and I don't have to act a specific way. Again, this comes from me feeling like a black sheep for almost everything that I've been involved in. I felt a little bit off from the rest of the group. And so I think it's important for people to realize that we're not out here trying to create some formulaic boy band approach. You have to look this way and sound this way and act this way, that you can appreciate those differences and even use them to your use these attributes or your experiences or whatnot to leverage those experiences. And I think that actually has a twofold effect, because not only are you showing that there's not one way or to look or act or to be from to be successful, but that there's also the flip side of being able to work in a cross-cultural environment, which is that I have students who are also from suburbs that may be in a homogeneous environment from a different spectrum, a different perspective. And to be able to be in an environment where a lot of the stereotypes that they may have heard are not true or are broken, and they're competing against other smart people regardless of where you're from and what you look like. And they're like, wow, you know, and if you succeed, you're all given the same tools, you're all access to the same tools. You might have a little more boost to be able to, you know, access them, but your access to equal education, access to equal tools, things of that sort. And then, you know, we're judged by kind of the non-ethnic, non-cultural criteria, and so if you succeed, you're not just, like, if you tell me that I'm just the best, you know, out of the female category, you're gonna be like, why am I not best overall? Because I run a darn good show, right? So it's building confidence and empowering people to say, you know, I'm not just best in my community, I'm competing against the best of everybody, and hey, you know, I am the best, and I won this particular thing. Or if, you know, you lose out to someone who, you know, maybe from the other spectrum, it's because, you know, there wasn't pity taken upon you, that there was, you know, fairness in that person, you know.
Let me move, and I'm going to ask another question, and I'm going to go to look specifically at Gilad and Jen, but feel free to answer the prior question. One of the, and Tito, you brought this up, one of the challenges, one of the largest challenges in doing innovation in the neighborhood is finding as diverse a source of capital that becomes available in an environment like the Innovation District, Kendall Square, or what have you. Talk to us about both your experiences with access to capital to do what you do, and you know, what recommendations would you have for the structures that could be built to better allow for more capital flow into neighborhoods for Innovation District building?
Okay, I'm just going to touch on that last question first, but I'm going to connect it to this one, so we won't get mad. And so I'm going to.
I am bigger than you.
And you got the hat. So I'm going to try to go. I'm going to go for the jugular on the previous one. I'm going to share a few things that were said to me over the past year while I was putting this program together. You know, I was actually looking for capital to get Smart in the City going, and for the companies that would come into it. And so I was knocking on a lot of doors and making a lot of phone calls in the city, and I had, you know, starting with the tall man here, a great investment. But I was really looking at the private sector, and we did get a lot of interest from the private sector and some investment as well. And I use the word investment, not handout. I'll touch on that. But I did get a little bit of skepticism, and one response from somebody who was in the South End of Back Bay, and didn't quite understand why I was coming to him for some money to be used to help a community that's about a 10-minute walk away from where he lives. And felt, well, why doesn't that community help itself? And it didn't anger me, but I just moved on to the next person. Another comment that was made to me, which upset me, I'm going to share it. When I said, you know, I work now almost every day in Dudley Square, and I feel I know the neighborhood very well. I know lots of people, and the response when I said I'm in Roxbury all the time, and one person, oh, what about safety? You know, there's a lot of people who just do not go to Roxbury, who've probably been in the city 15 years, or maybe all their life, but since high school, since going through a bus through Dudley Square, have not been back to Dudley Square. But I figured, well, do you feel safe there? And I said, well, of course I feel safe there. And the person, that question wasn't what bothered me, but the person next to that person said, well, it's because they know you. And I thought, no.
We do know you.
I said, no, it's I said, it's ridiculous. It's as if somebody there knows me, and therefore I'm not going to be harmed. And that's really what was said, and that's what a lot of people believe. And so my response was like, no, it's I know the community. It's I got over my fear. Because I'll be honest, if I go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and go to any neighborhood that I don't know, I'm not going to walk around and be safe. Doesn't matter who lives there. But the idea was that it's the opposite. It's you have to know a neighborhood, a community, and get over your own fear or misperception. And so that was number 2. I forgot what the third one was, or if that was 3. So tying it back to capital, though, the idea of investment versus handout. And I find that both in government and with private capital, the idea when you're helping a neighborhood, when you're helping, I'm not picking on any one specific place, but if you're helping something in Kendall Square, where you're investing there, it's an investment. You're investing to create jobs and capital for the city or for the state. But if you're doing that if that same money is going to Dudley Square, it's more of it's a handout. You're helping a person. You're not. But it's the opposite. Not the opposite. It's the same thing. You're helping a community, which is going to help the city and the state, and we have to get over that mindset.
Amen. Amen on that one. So I want to go back to a little bit to what Travis said, which is I just want to talk about race for a second, right? So white woman, live in the suburbs, comes into a predominantly African-American, Cape Verdean, Haitian neighborhood in Grove Hall and says, I'm going to fix this. Wow, that's completely, we all know this, right? This is the completely wrong way to do this, right? And what I saw when I went into that neighborhood was an awful lot of people who said, it'll never happen because we've been here so long and you are how many people on the list of nice, well-meaning white people coming into our neighborhood saying you're going to fix us. So we had to work really hard on that end. And what did we do? We spent a ridiculous amount of time talking to 1 million people at every possible community event to what was going to happen. It continued until the day we opened in July, so we spent 4 years in the planning, where people said, I don't believe you, it's never going to happen, but good luck, or keep trying. Tell me when it's open, and maybe I'll believe you then. So on one side, in the neighborhood side, there was that, in addition to, we took an old hot dog factory and we made it into a food business. There were a ton of people in the neighborhood who said, we remember when it was food, our family used to go there, get the corned beef and whatever, we love that. And we also definitely heard, really? Food? This is what the brown people get? Where's the tech jobs? Right? So we certainly heard that too, but we were working in this neighborhood where there's a lot of people who are coming who have Corys, there's a lot of people who maybe haven't graduated from high school, there's a lot of issues about employability, so how do we get them going? And so we made a lot of choices, some right, some wrong, some still to be determined, about what was going to happen on the food side. And then we started to look and say, okay, but this has to work for the people who are here. So what are we now doing to make sure today that we are incredibly intentional about that the people who are getting jobs, but then the people, more importantly, that are getting businesses are the people who look like you, and right? And so we actually, with the Boston Foundation, Damon over there helped us do this on the access to capital side. What was interesting was, coming from affordable housing, you can throw a rock here in Boston and see yet another consultant who does affordable housing work, right? It's just ridiculous. And when you look at the economic development world, it's so bifurcated and siloed and missing. And it's missing this place where you can go and get a loan if you have $250,000 in sales, you've been around for 5 years, and you got good credit. And you can't get it, even from the micro lenders, you can't get it if you have no history. And so what we saw and have seeing is these wonderful businesses, Fort Hill, the chicken business, unbelievable food that they do out of their backyard. And they do hundreds of, at a time on a weekend, all informal economy. They could not get a loan because they have credit's okay, whatever the issues were, no one's going to give it to them. So what did we do? We said, we're going to find a way with the Boston Foundation to put some money in their pocket. That was a grant. Long term, we want to talk about that as a loan product to get people started, because there is a problem with access to capital and getting them started. So that's on the neighborhood side. On the other side, I'm not kidding, there were 27 funding sources for this project. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. 50 businesses are going to work out of here. Whole Foods, all sorts of other places are going to be in this thing, and it took us 27 people to get involved. And the first one was some crazy HUD grant that made people go, okay, maybe. Or mostly what they said was, why are you doing it there? That idea might make sense. Go put it where all the other food businesses are. Go put it in some other, don't put it in some dense residential low-income neighborhood. That's crazy. So we had to work really, and it was a model that didn't exist. So move to the tech sector, oh my God, this model doesn't exist, how the hell are you going to get it to going? So we proved it on food, or we're still proving it on food. Amazing, transformative project where we think this will go, but we're not done. And so then the next question is, how do we take that same model, and instead of it food, what if it's tech? And that's what we're trying to struggle our way through, but we have the exact same problem of, why are you doing it there? Go do it in some other neighborhood. Go do it. There aren't the people there that exist. So part of what we need to now do is, it's all of these little pieces that put it together that say, no, those folks are really there. Here's where the history, the pieces are that exist. And trying to be able to tell, back to the last panel, of how do you tell those stories and where those people are.
And just to jump in, we also have to point to what we do in Boston. So we do kind of three different things. We do high tech, we do healthcare, and we do higher education. And so the question is, how do we align the things that we currently do with the things in the businesses that are currently there? So one of the things that we were able to do that was innovative, when negotiating, each institution has come up with an institutional master plan every 10 years. So Northeastern had the unlucky opportunity to deal with me. And at first, they had actually purchased some affordable housing that we made them sell, right? But then we actually looked at, what does the community benefit look like? And so how can we use the spend of an institution to actually help a neighborhood and help a community? So a couple of things that we were able to do. They want to build 1.1 million square feet in the next 10 years. So we are requiring them to spend 30% of their spend on each project with people of color, owned businesses, 10% with women. We also are requiring workforce of 51% residents, 40% people of color, and 10% women. And we came up with a really cool product. We were able to negotiate and force them into a $2.5 million revolving loan fund. So this is the university putting up money and leveraging money so they can actually help the people in the neighborhood that's around them. One, start businesses, but also two, do business with them. So to look at how their procurement breaks out of the Costco, let's go buy a whole lot from one person model, and how do we break it down so small businesses in the community are able to do that. We should use that model, we should say that to partners. Hey, we appreciate y'all. Y'all don't want to locate in Roxbury, you want to bring them to Somerville. So, what you should also do is think about how to invest in this neighborhood and community, and especially with healthcare, because we know one of the issues, or one of the biggest issues, is poverty in terms of the outcomes relative to healthcare. And then kind of lastly, in the high tech space, there are awesome young people in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan who do apps on a regular basis, who have conversations with me and I have no idea what they're talking about, but they're really, really cool. So also being able to hook them up with the Vickies of the world, as well as the smarter cities of the world, to bring them into those types of opportunities.
I want to weave together, just to make a sort of an umbrella comment about something all four of you, I think, are suggesting, and for the benefit of the audience, to push us all, including the innovation in the city event overall. I think the one common theme that you're suggesting is, once we get mission agreement, right? We have mission agreement that innovation and entrepreneurship for all, right? You're all suggesting in one way or another, whether it's from capital acquisition to who's negotiating deals to where you're locating and with whom you're having conversation, you have to actually actualize the mission and terraform, completely transform the way that you're doing business. You have to completely change who's in the room, who you're having conversations with. What's your mental model for what success looks like? What's your mental model for who is actually going to be negotiating the translate? Everything has to change if you're going to be true to that mission. It's not just about how you're parsing out capital differently. So I want to move to my next question, which is another elephant in the room when it comes to defining success when you're talking about innovation in the neighborhood. And that's the G word. No, not that G word. I guess there are lots of G words. This one is... yeah, you got another one, Tito. This one's gentrification. Okay? I'll try and ask the question in a non-normative way to allow for some debate. But what does success look like when developing innovation at a neighborhood level? Is success being able to attract high-tech companies into a particular neighborhood? Is success sort of the growth of technology businesses from within the neighborhood? Is success taking people who live in one of the inner ring suburbs and they hop on the orange line or the red line or what have you, and they work in the particular neighborhood? Or should we have people who are actually living in the neighborhood also working in the neighborhood? And I'm trying to paint as polar opposites as I possibly can to get you to sort of wrestle with some grist here. What does success look like, and how do we feel about gentrification?
Yes, we do. I dye my hair every 2 weeks because of gentrification. So it's something that not only keeps me up at night, but grates me. Boston is the fastest gentrifying city in the country based on the Cleveland Fed's recent study. So we're beating New York, we're beating DC. And so for me, in all honesty, I think success looks like uplifting people who live in neighborhoods who lived through 1991 when there were 151 murders in the city of Boston and people were just living in those neighborhoods, who lived through some of the most difficult economic times when it was a recession in our country. It was a depression for folks in these neighborhoods and communities. I'm not saying, and redefining what innovation means, and what I would love the innovation sector and technology sector to look at is, what is disruptive technology for poverty? How do we begin to look at disrupting the way that people have lived for so long? And so if it's just bringing people from the suburbs to displace the people who are, and in my district, I have on Fort Hill, there's a $1.4 million listing right now today. And the new 225 Center Street, right in front of Jackson Square, a one-bedroom right there will run you $1,850. But what we don't have is the economic engine to allow you to go from the $24,000 a year to making the $60,000, $70,000, or $80,000 a year. So for me, that gets us there. There is going to be some displacement. There are going to be businesses that move in, but the real innovation, and no one's gotten this right in the country, the real innovation in Boston and the challenge that we have in the city of Boston is, how do we keep in place physically, but elevate economically the people who live and have lived through some of the most difficult times. The ones who've been there to clean it up. The ones who've been there to make it so that people aren't getting shot and that there's not visible drug dealing and prostitution in these neighborhoods. Those neighborhood watch folks who were able to watch over it for a long time. How do we mobilize and move things up? And this, to me, is something that we can all work on. But what it's not taking Kendall Square and putting it in the middle of Dudley Square. That is absolutely not what I'm looking to see, and it'll be something that, if that were to happen, that would actually be the definition of failure for me.
So I want to stay on this one a little bit, and that, I think, totally right about how do we think about how do you keep in place the people who are there. And coming from the world of affordable housing, this is where affordable housing can play an important role of creating places for people to stay, but it also keeps them in a certain place. And so we have to figure out a way to make the housing part of this work. I worked on a project in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, which was the old brewery. People know that, some people might know that one. So it's 150,000 square feet of space in what, when I started there, it was about half empty, and it was one of the highest rates of heroin use in the city. And half of the complex was barbed wire fence and chain link, right? We came in, nonprofit, and said, we got to do something better than this, what can we do? So we set about, did a really wonderful project that has a music school and a gym and a dance school and a cafe and a restaurant. Super cool, great project, right? Created 50 businesses are working out of there, 500 jobs. And all of a sudden the neighborhood now is the brewery district. Here's the gentrification, right? My organization looks around and says, okay, well, but there's a lot of jobs that created here. The gym that's there is owned by a Latino guy who we helped him get his financing, never would have gotten it had we not helped him. That's good. But you go to the cafe and it's, what is it, $9 for a tuna fish sandwich. Really? So there's been constant debate within our organization and within the neighborhood of, is that good for the neighborhood or not? Yes and no, I would say, was in that case. What's the lesson that I learned from doing that project that I now take when I think about the tech work that we're doing is we need to be way more intentional about who are we benefiting and who is getting those the long-term economic opportunities. So when we started to look at doing the tech incubator concept, basically doing a fab lab, a makerspace kind of a concept, and bring it to a low-income neighborhood, say right down the street from where we're doing the other thing. The conversation with the neighborhood folks we were talking to was, how do we make sure it benefits them, right? And so we talked about pricing. I came up with this great financial model. Oh, it's only going to be $100 a month, $150 a month, and you can use this incredible facility with all this great equipment. And people looked at me and said, $150 a month? I got to feed my family. I can't do that. And I looked at it and thought, oh, that's a great deal, right? That's like, a gym membership. I said, okay, well, what if it's $100 a month? Okay, well, it's better. Well, if it's $50 a month and we find some other way, then it was, oh my God, it's going to be people who look like me who are going to come in and are going to use it, and now the gentrification thing happens again. So that's the conundrum, right? So my thinking about it, I'm interested to hear others' thoughts, is that for this to work, we have to make sure that on day one, the people who are in the facility, the people who run the facility, the people who manage that facility are the people who are from that neighborhood. That they control what's happening there, that the culture of what's there, the people who show up, because people are connected to other people, that's how these things happen. And so that if this is going to work in that neighborhood, the way that we take it to make it work is going to be that the people there are the ones who are owning it, operating it, living it. And that my work is to think about where to be intentional about that and where to go convince all the capital sources that they have to come in to make that happen.
So to that, the problem with gentrification is that it's a force that you really can't have control over unless you're in communist Russia, where you can say who can live somewhere and who can't. Or in the 1960s here, I guess, in the suburbs. But, in the other direction. Right. So, how do you kind of say, other than affordable housing, which I think is also not the only, it's not the good answer, because you don't want to have a community that's only affordable housing. That's not the right answer. You want to have affordable to many different levels of income, and you can talk about how you can try to achieve that, and there's different policies that can make that happen, and different and zoning that can make that happen, and requirements of new developments that you know that you have a mixed income coming into a development, and Boston is trying to do that, and they do have a good policy here, and are doing better than many of the other neighboring towns and cities. They don't use the 40B in Boston. There's an inclusionary zoning that was 15%? Yeah. Although there are ways to get out of that by paying into a fund that then relocates the housing elsewhere, which doesn't really help that process. But housing is one piece, and business is another piece. And I think there's a way, it's a question, it's more than an answer, but how can you say, well, you can have a diversity of businesses in a place like Dudley Square or Grove Hall, and you can have, Microsoft can have a branch office of 100 people working, not 3,000, but 100 people working in a branch office in Grove Hall, or in Dudley Square. That's not going to cause gentrification. That is providing jobs both in the community and for people who might be commuting from Lexington. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it doesn't create displacement of the community.
But that's what it does.
This is, I think this is, for my money, one of the thorniest issues an urban environment has to wrestle with, and I think part of the beauty of this issue is that you actually have to wrestle with it. There are varying degrees of answer, but you can't not wrestle with it, because then, yes, forces beyond your control will take over. Vicky?
I just wanted to quickly add that I understand that we can't lift Kendall Square and put it in a completely different environment. However, I do still feel strongly that there are models out there that work, and it's not wrong to look at some of them and extrapolate certain aspects that do work. And one of the things in certain communities that do work is diversity. And there's diversity in all different respects, right? So not just in ethnic, but I think that a lot of the communities have really grown organically based off of differences in interests and skill sets and things of that sort. So one of the things that I hope to see in other areas, and I have these discussions with a neighboring town. I'm closer to Lawrence, so a lot of the kind of conversations are very similar in a different area. But also that when you are trying to build community in a different place that's unlike Kendall, to just caution that it's not so much focused on a community of inclusion that it almost excludes, diversity from outside. Because I think, regardless, even in an organization, if we work for a great organization, we don't just learn from our organization or just learn from our school. We try to diversify our interests and our skill sets and our training and our education from outside of the area. So, that's just something that comes to mind.
You guys have been great. It's 10 minutes after 4. I'm going to ask one more question, then open it up to the audience for questions. Before leaving the last topic, however, I do want to just share an anecdote. At the Boston Foundation, we funded the opening of a number of stations along the Fairmount corridor in the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park area. And these station openings, this is transit-oriented development 101. These station openings led to a predictable increase in economic activity around these stations. It happened literally happened overnight, where you saw property rises, properties changing hands, and so on and so forth. We filmed a documentary, a short little piece, and we interviewed a young man who grew up in the neighborhood about what was happening in his neighborhood around one of these stations, and he lamented that this economic activity, and this is such a poignant moment for us at the foundation, it's one of those careful what you wish for moments. he lamented that this uptick in economic activity and the property rises and the property is starting to change hands put him in the position to have to fight against the very things that he had wanted for his entire life. This gentrification issue is real. It's the real thing. And if you're going to be talking about innovation in the neighborhoods, it's not just about technology. You have to deal with these urban issues because they affect people in their lives on a real deep and visceral level. So my final question for the panel is, the prior panel got into a little bit of a debate about what is innovation, right? And we have to call it what it is. You know, if it's not technology related, then it's not innovation, it's entrepreneurship. All right, let's go with that. Let's call that innovation. All right, what do we need to do in order to build a broader, more rapid pipeline, of innovation technology from within the neighborhood? What's the kind of infrastructure that we need? And while you're thinking about that, I just want to give a shout out to the folks at the District Hall, Microsoft, Google, some of the other companies that are here in the greater Boston area that have been, that's ever since they set foot in this town, they've been so intentional about programs and programming for the entire greater Boston community. But we, notwithstanding those efforts, you know, we need to get that into the Boston public school system. We need to get, what do we need? What's the infrastructure that we need in order to home grow more innovation from our neighborhoods?
So I just wanted one comment on the diversity thing, and then I want to talk about this, which is just to say that we have to be careful when we talk about diversity as not being just a different way of the gentrification question, right? That I know people in low-income, mostly African-American neighborhoods who say, well, we saw a white person come in, now we know what, oh, that's diversity, but in fact, that's the start of the gentrification. So we just want to be, how we talk about it, right, is a really important thing, that I agree that you want to have lots of voices in the room, because then you reach out, you make connections, all businesses and informal, how relational work, and so we need to know more people to be able to be more successful. From where I sit, and my bias is I'm a real estate development person, right? So I come at it from that side. But I look at, especially in the technology thing, and I look at the Boston Public Schools, and I say, really, Madison Park, Voc High School, like what's going on there? We can't get it together. So is that a place for people to get access? Not anytime soon that I can see. Roxbury Community College, is that a place for people to get access? Not anytime soon. So when I look at this and I see where's the infrastructure need to be, I say we need to create, that's why I'm interested in this idea of like the makerspace or something like that, that's a place where people, they don't even know what's out there. An awful lot of people, the number of businesses I see that don't have a website, right? They don't have email, right? The contractors we want to get into all this work, they can't use CAD. How do we teach them how to use CAD? Because that to me is how do you be relevant in the 21st century? And where is it, it's about the technology. Some of that's innovative. I don't know how to think about that. But so for me, being able to create, you know, it's the, people talk about the maker world of the libraries of the future are places where people come and they learn about 3D printers and laser cutters and how to do web-based technology and how to do web searches and all that. That to me, getting it deep into the neighborhood so people understand where the possibilities are and the opportunities are so that you put it in their hands is an important place to start.
I'm going to jump in. Absolutely, the schools, I would say, is number one as far as not just catching up in the case of Madison Park or in some other schools, trying to reach any kind of level that if we want to equalize, although I don't like the term equalize, but it should be a jump, it should be a leap. Schools should be trying to not just enter the innovative market, prepare people for an innovative marketplace for technology, for STEAM, providing STEAM education. There is STEAM education, but putting more emphasis on STEAM education. But what happens outside the schools is just as important. I'm going to use a quick example from my children's school in Cambridge. I live in Cambridge, and my kids go to Cambridge Board School, which is sort of in the mid-east part of Cambridge, and it is the most diverse school you could imagine. It is a wonderful place, first of all, and wonderful teachers, and the kids are wonderful, and they're absolutely every color and background and religion you could imagine there. And you think, okay, well, everyone here has an equal has an equal shot. And my kids are in kindergarten and second grade, and honestly, at the kindergarten, you can start to see the difference of what children are receiving, not just at school. And you see it in the after-school programs. Who's attending the after-school programs and who's not able to. You see it in which parents are able to attend meetings because one parent is at home and the other parent comes to the meeting, and which are not, and who are not. Who has this more access to information at home and who does not. And this is in Cambridge. Though in Boston and in some schools, when you don't have as much diversity there, when you don't have a school system that's extremely well funded, I don't know the exact difference between Boston and Cambridge as far as funding, but it's not just the schools, and I might pass this over to Councilor Jackson.
No, so I absolutely agree that the school component is absolutely critical, and I think you start with kindergartners. So poor kids get read to on average for 25 hours, and your kids were probably read to on average 1,700 hours going in. That's an hour a night, right? And so those cute little kids who are walking in, as you're noting, aren't on the same level relative to how we do things. Boston Public Schools, about 40% of the students have at least one parent who speaks another language. We have with a large population, about 11,000 students right now who are in special education programs. So we actually have to really build a system that, as noted, that is fast forwarding our young people to where we need to get to. And I think from the technology space, in developing countries, instead of going to wire and copper-based phones, they went directly to mobile. That's the same type of concept that we need to use for the young people who are in the urban system. And I'll be real, there are two systems, right? So in Boston Public Schools, we have the test schools and we have the charter schools, which I don't think are actually self-selecting for the smartest young people. I think it's self-selecting for the most engaged parents. And those folks who are the people who can fill out the application, know how to get you to take the test in that space. But back to the question around what's innovation. Innovation is getting different people in the room. Innovation isn't building the new Google, because that's been built. Innovation isn't a couple of folks hanging out and starting something in a garage. That's been done before too. But innovation, I think, relative to cities, is bringing a greater and more diverse group of people to the table, empowering them in dealing with issues that we have never got to the bottom of, such as gentrification, such as the achievement gap, and such as the opportunity gap. And lastly, I would say I'm reading Eric Schwartz's book, Opportunity Nation. When he's looking at what's going on in our schools, the other part of it, and you said the after-school programs, in affluent neighborhoods, there's just more schooling going on. So folks are doing robotics. Vicky showed me this new program she does on robotics. There's all of this not only extended day, but just programming that's going on that oftentimes their parents are paying for. And Eric even brought up his child didn't have a good English teacher. So what did he do? That summer he hired another English teacher. And they came into their home and actually tutored. So that is something that we need to do, and it pays off. We have a 5% dropout rate in the city of Boston, but for every one of those kids who drop out, We all pay $425,000 a year over the, $425,000 over the course of their lifetime. We have to step our game up, and it does start with lean on people.
So I just want to say that I think, kind of touching upon last point and this one is that for the success of it, if I can borrow a word that the Chief Innovation Officer at Boston Children's Hospital uses for how innovation can actually be implemented somewhere, is being able to pass or reach the O gap, the operational gap, and to be able to pass into that, because there's a lot of innovative ideas, but how it actually gets executed is sort of the big issue. And so I think that there's a couple of different things in a couple of different directions that all have to kind of be done in parallel. There's the aspect of, but all fundamentally tied to the fact that you have to remember that your community that you're addressing right now is a very key stakeholder. And most of us in the room are probably very well aware of what the word stakeholder means and why that every single stakeholder involved in the implementation of something has to be taken into consideration. So I think that, some of the issues that you're talking about, I think it's very key to remember that in the community, that as we try and improve it, we don't take the essence of the community away, right? And that can be done in a couple of ways. One is utilizing kind of low-hanging fruit. This is what I like to call circle of resources around you. Things that the community has a wealth of, or it can be leveraged into an attribute that is very special and then cannot be replicated in a Kendall Square or any other area. The other aspect is, what Tito had talked about, is bring innovators outside in. And that can be done in a way where, especially from like a process model innovation for how do we make sure that as the community builds up, that we don't edge out the people that were part of the heart of the community to begin with. And the last aspect is, the future generation, the pipeline that Travis said you referred to. And we work very hard to try and democratize access to education. I personally work with a lot of kids from the Boston public school system, quite a lot of students from District 7 specifically. I also teach in Roxbury as well. So, I think that having them be able to understand that not only can they do things that are possible with all the resources and the help that everybody wants to provide, but another key thing that I've seen a lot of is that, when you try and we definitely address or attract a lot of students who I like to call thirsty learners. Their GPAs may not be the highest, but they're very ambitious and want to make impact and things of that sort. And I think it's very careful to make sure that whatever the efforts are, it's not the mentality of, oh my goodness, as soon as I'm successful, let me get the heck out of this community and go to a better one. What we're trying to do is have the kids who, may work within their community or may get some training outside of the community, but to take that training, what they've learned from that diversity, and bring it back to their own community and how to apply it, so that instead of brain drain, you're actually saying, I'm going to bring these innovative models, these new tools that I've had, and because I grew up here, I'm a subject matter expert in this area. I understand the problems, and I can use my newfound knowledge to help fix it. And I think that if there's, and I know it's not as easy, as just saying that, but taking all those things into consideration, that we can hopefully remember that, our community that we're trying to build for is the key stakeholder that cannot be left out with all the innovative, improvement processes that we're trying to do.
Travis, can I say one more thing?
You've got about 15
seconds.
I
would say the last innovation that I would bring up is that innovation shouldn't only happen in the district. It should happen across the city as a whole. When you go out to Silicon Valley, that's not a place, right? It's a connected community of municipalities. And so in Boston, what we have to break out of is just saying this Fertile Crescent over here is innovation. We actually have to make sure that innovation and the fertility spreads throughout the region.
Well put, well put. So we have time for a couple questions, and so what I think, in the interest of time, what I'd like to do is ask you to give us your question, try and keep it under 30 seconds, and I'm actually going to bank a number of questions and allow the panel to respond to them. So let's bank 3 quick questions, please. We'll start here.
Go. Okay, so this is coming to you, Travis and Tito, primarily. When it comes to financing, innovation tends to be a noun instead of a verb, that it should be. hard assets tend to get, I hear this nationwide in my research, that you can get facilities financed, but that's third-tier issues when you're trying to promote activities, programming, ideas. What is going on in your areas of financing to support innovation as a verb, the programming, and making the engagement happen, and not just the places? Take MIT, when the NSF had community development funding for them for Fab Labs. I went to hard assets, and about half of them that I saw were completely empty because they didn't have programming money. In fact, right outside the O'Brien School sat a mobile Fab Lab for over a year. They could only fund one class a week, and it was an underutilized facility that could have done wonders in a place that needed it.
Perfect. Financing verb, not a noun. Next one.
Hi, Shaheen Ali, Massachusetts native. Real quick, getting back to the financing aspect of it, so handout versus getting an investment. How do we get companies to see that they can actually get a hard return on their investment? You know, they need 20, 25% return bottom line to want to invest in a neighborhood, or in an area, or a business, I should say. Otherwise, they do it as a handout. Oh, I did this good deed. How do we do that? How have you come across that challenge?
Got it. Impact investing.
You want to just go with those two, or you want one more?
Let's take a third.
Take a third? Put it back here.
Thanks so much for coming. Let's say that I'm somebody who has a lot of money. I think there are a lot of people in suburbs and just individuals. Sorry, but yeah, there are a lot of people with a lot of money. My question is, how do you actually find somebody who's trying to start a small business? See, there are lots of people who are trying to start small businesses, but I don't feel like they are trained to just, go to their neighbor. How do you, if you don't have a foundation or you don't have a fund, how do you identify an entrepreneur?
Beautiful. So let me encapsulate the three questions. And if you don't mind, I'll take the first and allow you guys to take 2 and 3. The first one is how do we, as a practice, change the way we look at financing from being more of a noun to being more of a verb, and in funding programs as well as just physical hard assets. The second has to do with my phrase, and I think the term of art really is impact investing. How do we ensure that folks who are looking to place capital into businesses in the community are going to get market-esque or market rate returns? Third question is about deal flow. How do you find the deal flow? How do you find the entrepreneurs that you can invest in doing the second question, right? That the entrepreneurs are going to be able to have a great idea, or, and I want to be provocative here, or fail rapidly. Because that's what this game is all about. Either you succeed rapidly or you fail rapidly, and we have to be okay with both. So on the first question, I'll just simply say, we are really blessed here in Boston. There has been an explosion over the past 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and Vicky is sort of the poster child for this. There has been an explosion of the number of nonprofit organizations that are focused in the innovation space. Whether it's Vicky's organization, Sneakers to Beakers, Launch Code, Scripted, Black Girls Code, Code for, I mean, I could go down a list of organizations that are looking for financing or need financing for their programs, okay? And we, meaning philanthropy, we're doing the best that we can to ensure that these organizations stay healthy. Part of the challenge is, however, we have a wealth of these organizations that are out there. This is a fertile crescent when it comes to these organizations that are providing this kind of technology-based training. And some of them are, frankly, are so young that we don't know which of these programs are effective. In philanthropy, we're in the business, increasingly in the business of not just funding programs. We're in the business of funding effective programs, right? So part of our challenge is to provide enough capital for these organizations to get their sea legs, right? But then not do the philanthropy thing which is to continue to fund these organizations ad infinitum, regardless of their outcomes. So part of what we do is we fund new ideas, and we let them take root, and then we challenge these entrepreneurs, these social entrepreneurs, because largely they're social entrepreneurs, to prove and demonstrate to us the success of their programs. So that's my response. But let's get to the other two in terms of impact investing and deal flow.
I think a couple of things that we can learn from Kendall Square is we do need more accelerators like Smarter in the City. We also need more co-working spaces like the Phil's Corner space. So we continue to really and use this concept of community building and actually move it over to innovation in neighborhoods and communities. There's at CIC, there's VCs who come in there on a monthly basis. And they're connecting with, and actually they're speaking to people before they actually have the greatest of ideas. So I think that connection and the relationships that are built, like they have it at CIC, like they have it at Venture Cafe, are things that are tenets that we can actually bring over to neighborhoods and communities throughout the city.
Right, and we need the places, we need the accelerators and the co-work spaces, but we also need the meetups, and we need the investor showcases, and so for the gentleman from the suburbs to come down and to meet all the people who might be the people he'll invest in or she'll invest in. That's something that we can do, and we can do this tomorrow. But we have to make sure that people come. So both sides have to come to the table, and then I think the deal. Was it deal book? What was the phrase? Deal flow, sorry. The deal flow might be better in place, and then the capital flow. I'm hoping.
I think the issue on it is that it's the hand up and the hand out side of this. So I know the Fab Lab people, and I've seen how the thing that they did over in Madison Park was a wonderful missed opportunity, right? And I come from the nonprofit sector, and I'll tell you, most people I know in the nonprofit sector are not entrepreneurs. Right? They're used to working in a system where it's a hand up all the time, and they are ad infinitum. Hey, Travis, can I have some more money? Forever, right? And we get tired of it. And so part of what we're trying to do on innovation is we're trying to innovate how the nonprofit sector is working, right? So our CropCircle kitchen, we are 80% earned revenue, and we hope to be 100% earned revenue when we're at full occupancy in about a year and a half. So that's how we're trying to change how we do that. I just want to say on the capital side, first of all, 20% return, it's not possible for the kind of stuff we're talking about. But I think that there is real return, and I think there's an education that we have to do with people about that there is return in these projects. And I spent a lot of time trying to find people to say, hey, I got all sorts of stuff where you can have the thing that's interesting in the work that we do within the real estate side is that these projects don't get foreclosed on. So they're actually really, really sound investments. So if you look at this as there's an investment in the real estate and then there's an investment in the business, if you invest in the real estate, you can make an easy return because you know it's not going anywhere. If you invest in the business, there's an opportunity for it to scale. And the question on the business side is going to be, where do you do just like what the venture capital funds do and say it's not one at a time. It has to be where are the pools of funds.
And let me make an offer to you to actually approach it the same way that you approach doing a deal in Kendall Square, right? You're not going to roll up to someone who has no familiarity with Kendall Square and ask them where the deals are at Kendall Square, right? The same way, in our neighborhoods, you don't what the expectation should be is you need your conciliare, right? You need your person who actually knows what's going on in the neighborhood. I had a meeting this morning, just by way of example, and I guess we'll have to end. But I had a meeting this morning with an individual who brought to me, Damon and myself at the Boston Foundation, 2 transactions I had no idea about. No idea. One is literally a sort of a chia pet acquisition. just add water and it's profitable. Oh, just right out of the box, it's a profitable minority-owned business. The gentleman who runs it has diabetes. His kids don't want to run it, so boom, just add water. It's a profitable business. I had no idea. And the second one is the same type of an opportunity. And the acquisition here is not only the acquisition of the business, but it's the acquisition of the contracts. Again, ready-made. But if you don't know the people who know where these businesses are, and also, frankly, if you yourself you're not someone who has interest in this person and interest in the neighborhood, then it's going to be really hard for you to get access to this deal flow. I just want to say thank you. These are 4 iconoclastic leaders, and they are gifts to the city of Boston. You haven't. I've called you someone. They are gifts to the city of Boston. If you have an opportunity after the panel is over, just come up and say hi. I would strongly recommend it. But I, for one, I've enjoyed this experience, and I hope we have an opportunity to do this again for the 5 of us. So thank you, everyone.